Michigan Congressman Tim Walberg is a Christian pastor. He's a so-called good Christian, and he has a solution for what's going on in Gaza. Drop nuclear weapons, talking about Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
We shouldn't be spending a dime on humanitarian aid. It should be like Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Get it over quick.
You're a terrible person.
You kill children, not me.
What?
Go.
My kids? What about my kids?
You kill children, not me. Go.
I didn't kill children.
Okay, well, I see
You
here.
know why? If we killed 4,000 Palestinian kids, you know what? It wasn't enough. To my friends in immigration.
Really? Okay, go, yeah.
And to the Egyptian, the Mukhabarat wants your picture.
Okay, yeah.
You know the Mukhabarat?
The
Mukhabarat.
No, I don't know.
You don't know?
I just speak English.
No?
Yeah, go, yeah.
Mukhabarat in Egypt will get your parents.
Go.
Does your
yeah.
father like his fingernails? They'll take them out one by one. Did you rape your daughter like Muhammad did? Did you rape your daughter like Muhammad? Because Muhammad was a rapist. The Holy Quran that some people use as a toilet. What do you think of that? People who use the Quran as a toilet.
His name is Stuart Seldowitz, who not only served in the Obama administration, but actually had a pretty high-level position. He was the deputy director and senior political officer in the United States State Department's Office of Israel and Palestinian Affairs for a long time.
In Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? But I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up, and then clean it up, and then clean it up, and then clean it up.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible, and we do remember, and we are fighting. Our brave troops and combatants who are now in Gaza or around Gaza and in all other regions in Israel are joining this chain of Jewish heroes, a chain that has started 3,000 years ago from Joshua ben Nun until the heroes of 1948, the Six-Day War, the 73 October War, and all other wars in this country. Our hero troops, they have one supreme main goal: to completely defeat the murderous enemy and to guarantee our existence in this country.
There is no mercy. You may think you're being merciful to a child, but you're not being merciful to the child. You're being vicious to the ultimate victim that this child will grow up and kill. Because the ideology that that child will grow up with is even worse than the ideology of his father. Hence the reason why the Torah in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 20, verse 16, says, rules of war, lo techaye kol neshama, do not allow anyone to remain alive. Nothing. No mercy. Furthermore, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 25, verse 19, macho et zecher Amalek, completely erase any memory of Amalek, which means men, women, and children, the Torah says, do not have the right to exist.
I want to say this to our Christian friends, just to call it as it is and say it straight out, you guys are worshiping one Jew. That's a mistake. You should be worshiping every single one of us, because we all die for your sins every single day, and that's exactly what's going on here. Yeah. We're all God's firstborn, and we're dying for your sins right now, because the Jewish people in the land of Israel are the bulwark against the orcs. Okay, the orcs are coming not to a theater near you, but to your home.
obviously referencing the Palestinians, meaning that they're animals, they're not humans. But again, here's a Jewish rabbi telling Christians that they should be worshiping him and all of the other Jews in Israel. Statements like that will just be pushed under the rug and, forgotten and say, oh, well, that's just one rogue,
The three principles which enable us Israelis to live so easily with this brutal reality. A, most of the Israelis, if not all of them, deeply believe that we are the chosen people. And if we are the chosen people, we have the right to do whatever we want. B, there were more brutal occupations in history. There were even longer occupations in history, even though the Israeli occupation gets to quite a nice record. But there was never in history an occupation in which the occupier presented himself as the victim. Not only the victim, the only victim around. This also enables any Israeli to live in peace because we are the victims. To the third set of values which enable us Israelis to live in peace with the occupation, and this is maybe the most crucial one and the worst one. We said victimization, we said chosen people. When I say victimization, it goes without saying we have to mention the Holocaust and the unforgettable Mrs. Golda Meir that the American jury had exported to Israel. She said once, this unforgettable woman, that after the Holocaust, the Jews have the right to do whatever they want. But the third set of values is the most dangerous one, and this is the systematic dehumanization of the Palestinians, which enable us Israelis to live in peace with everything. Because if they are not human beings like us, then there is not really a question of human rights. And if you scratch under the skin of almost every Israeli, you will find it there. Almost no one will treat the Palestinians as equal human beings like us.
Now that Hamas has agreed to a ceasefire, do you think Israel should agree?
I think Israel should go in there and kick the shit out of them. Just absolutely destroy them, their infrastructure, level anything that they touch.
Why are you so hateful?
It's not hateful.
It is, because my people are Palestinian. You're killing my people with our tax dollars. And you saying that everything
should associate themselves with terrorists. They shouldn't vote terrorists into office.
We keep
like Hamas.
Israel is the terrorist.
Palestinian Islamic
Israel is the terrorist.
Martyrs Brigade, Lions Den, Fatah, all those terrorist organizations.
We say to you every single time, majority.
पकड़ के घर में ले गया और क्या बोला जय श्री राम का बोला नारा लगाओ बोलो नहीं लगाया चाकू को गिरा दिया था।
बिहार के चंपारण में एक मुस्लिम लड़के से जबरन जय श्री राम के नारे लगवाने का मामला सामने आया है। इसी के पास एक गांव में कुछ लोगों ने उसे जबरन जय श्री राम के नारे लगाने को कहा और जब उसने ऐसा नहीं किया तो उस पर चाकू से हमले किए गए और उसके गले को काटने की कोशिश की गई।
उसी ने हमको घेर लिया है और पकड़ के घर में ले गया और क्या बोला बोलो जय श्री राम का बोलो नारा लगाओ बोलो नहीं लगाया चाकू को गिरा दिया था और मारा है सब तरह से फुटबॉल तरह बना के मैंने इधर से कोई मार रहा था कोई इधर से मार रहा था।
इजराइल में मिलने का जो से बचना तो 4-5 लोग पकड़ कर कहे कि जय श्री का नारा लगा जय नारा नहीं लगाए उसको पकड़ के घर में मार के रोड पर
जय श्री राम बोल लो बोल जल्दी यार क्यों ना बोल लो अरे बोले क्यों ना बोल जय श्री राम अरे ना बोल लो आइयो अब बोल जय श्री राम जय श्री राम एक और बार जय श्री राम
مفحدين بكل משפחת אזולאי. משפחת אזולאי, משפחה מאוד, מאוד, ג'ידן, עובדת, חשובה, ואנחנו רוצים להיות עבדים של משפחת אזולאי לנצח נצחים, לעבוד אצלם בביוב ובגינון ולעשות עבודה טובה מאוד.
That I know for the police that you were attacking me.
But you cannot do this.
Don't take a picture. Take it down.
No, come
Take
on,
it down.
this is not. You are touching me. You have no right to touch me. You have no right to spit on me. Hey, come on. Very good. Good to make a picture of him. Very good. No, he spit on me. No, he spit on me. He touched
This is a how-to video on how to blow up a mosque in Gaza. The format is internet fluent. The content is very real. Filmed, edited, and posted on Instagram by an Israeli soldier. It's one of dozens reviewed by CNN. For many in 2024, social media is everyday life. Israeli soldiers are no different, except they're fighting Israel's largest and most brutal war in decades. In video after video after video, soldiers document the destruction of Gaza and rejoice. They film detonations to use as wedding invitations. Among them are would-be comedians, whose videos satirizing the war show the devastation in Gaza. The videos often end up on the social media channels of right-wing political commentators. They boast to the Israeli public of the tactics used to defend them. At times, they openly defy their military's message about protecting civilians. And film themselves destroying civilian shops. Israel is under increasing scrutiny over the war in Gaza. These videos may well be adding fuel to that criticism.
Ultra-Orthodox Jews spit toward Christians carrying a cross in occupied East Jerusalem this week, an act of religious hatred, igniting a scandal in Israel and beyond. Other videos, also widely seen on social media, show Jews spitting toward nuns outside a church. And yet another where Jews spit at a church doorway. Some ultranationalist and settler leaders say spitting at or near Christians and churches is a legitimate Jewish tradition with a long history. Meanwhile, more than 1,400 ultranationalists and settlers entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex on Wednesday under Israeli police escort.
They came here to attack Arabs.
You're watching Jewish Israelis, some armed with baseball bats, headed in the direction of a mosque.
Local Jews marked Arab houses in a red spray, so the ones who come from outside will recognize our houses and attack us. ISIS did it, and the Nazis did it. and now they are doing it for us.
Residents here told us that right-wing Jewish settlers are moving into Arab-majority neighborhoods in a deliberate effort to dilute the population.
We want the Palestinians to say, this is our land, this is our country, this is our city.
The minute that set everything and the police lost it is when an Arab boy climbed that electric pole over there and he moved the Israel flag and he put instead a Palestinian flag.
A surprising report from Israel today where officials are taking seriously a recent upsurge in spitting and hitting attacks on clergy and the vandalism of Christian sites.
Christians in Jerusalem's Old City say they've been repeatedly assaulted.
Feel attacked in their places of prayer, in their cemeteries and on the streets.
Christians in Jerusalem's Old City say they are often harassed, spit on, and even physically attacked by religious Jewish youth.
I view this phenomenon as extreme and unacceptable in any shape or form. This phenomenon needs to be uprooted.
Earlier incidents include the desecration of a Protestant cemetery on Mount Zion, an attack on international Christians during a day of prayer for Jerusalem, and harassment at a Messianic concert in Jerusalem. Recently, Israeli Channel 13 reporter Yossi Eli went undercover as a priest for a day. Dressed in a robe, he walked through the Old City with Franciscan Father Alberto. In the first 5 minutes, he was spat at 5 times by Orthodox Jewish Israelis.
If you haven't seen it yet, a French newspaper is making fun of the Chazans starving during Ramadan. The cartoonist shows a Palestinian running after rats and cockroaches as a woman slaps his hand and says, "Tss, not before sunset."
We imposed the most brutal sanctions in human history on Iraq. We cut off their food and we cut off their medicine for 12 years. 100,000 Iraqis die per year. By the end of the Clinton administration, the first 8 years of these brutal sanctions, 800,000 people were dead. The UN estimated that of the 800,000 Iraqis that had starved to death or died because of lack of medicine, 500,000, 500,000, were age 5 and under. We murdered 500,000 babies in that 8-year span of time. Over the next 4 years, we kill another 100,000 a year until there's Iraq War II in 2003. From that point on, from 2003 until we withdraw, we killed another 1.3 to 2 million Iraqis. In other words, over the course of the last 20, or the course of that 21 years, basically from 1991 to 2011, we killed about 3 million Iraqis.
We have technology that we can see exactly who's in these locations and buildings. So they're targeting and bombing homes, knowing who and how many children were actually inside. My name is Josephine Gilbo. I'm a 17-year Army veteran. I recently got out of the military last year. Having that background as an intelligence officer and understanding what defense actually is, I can see clearly that this is not self-defense. The civilian casualties is catastrophic. They're targeting homes filled with children. The elite that sit in Capitol Hill sit there and lie over and over and over. I just want to highlight one of the biggest awakenings that I think I've had the last few weeks coming here and lobbying with the senators and the congressmen is just how corrupt our government is. And that anyone that's in the military is simply just one chess piece that they use at their leisure for their own internal gain to protect their own internal assets and money.
I was thinking about a certain thing that's written in the Talmud, in the Gemara, and it says that Jesus, Yeshu, is in hell, boiling in a pit of his own excrement. And those things are written in the Talmud when it talks about Jesus.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
I literally just got out of jail like an hour and a half ago, and there was one song that we were singing all the time in there, and it was, "Am I being gonna let your system walk right over me?" And we unequivocally will not allow any of these systems to walk right over us. We are here, we are strong. They can mace us, they can brutalize us, they can pepper spray us. But the movement is here, it is stronger than ever. Our energy has not dissipated. As a matter of fact, it's come back 10 times stronger. I'm not gonna lie, y'all, I don't have much to say other than the fact that they can try all they might, but we're not gonna let no fucking system walk all over us.
Would you have supported dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, General Brown, in World War II? Well, do you, in hindsight, do you think that was the right decision for America to drop 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities in question?
Well, I'll tell you to stop the World War.
Okay, well, so we had do you agree, General Austin? If you'd been around, would you say drop them? Do you believe Iran really wants to kill all the Jews if they could? The Iranian regime, yeah. Do you believe Hamas is serious when they say we'll keep doing it over and over again? Do you agree that they will if they can?
I do.
Okay, right. Do you believe that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, also bent on the destruction of the Jewish state?
Hezbollah is a terrorist organization.
Okay, so Israel's been hit in the last few weeks by Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, dedicated to their destruction. And you're telling me you're going to tell them how to fight the war and what they can and can't use when everybody around them wants to kill all the Jews? And you're telling me that if we withhold weapons in this fight, the existential fight for the life of the Jewish state, it won't send the wrong signal? If we stop weapons necessary to destroy the enemies of the state of Israel at a time of great peril, we will pay a price. This is obscene. It is absurd. Give Israel what they need to fight the war they can't afford to lose. This is Hiroshima and Nagasaki on steroids.
I think that the Islam is it's a very bad disease, not just for Israel, for all around the world. We can see it. They think they all have to be Islam. If you're not Islam, they will kill you.
I also am in an organization. It's called Lahava. It's against that Jews shouldn't marry Arabs. That Jews shouldn't marry Arabs.
Shouldn't marry Arabs. Why do you feel strongly about that?
Because Jews is a special nation that God gave it to the Jews, and we don't want Jews to get mixed up together with a different nation.
I think Israelis have to take over, and they have to kick them away. It will be much better.
You can't deal with these people. There's no need to try. There's no need to talk to them. What we can do is when they do enough harm, we retaliate. That's war, and that's the situation that any Jew who lives in Israel has to deal with.
אוקיי, בסדר בעברית? פשוט מאוד, צריך להיכנס לשטחים וכל מחבל שעושה פיגוע צריך להרוג אותו, צריך להרוג את המחבלים ואז הם יפחדו ולא יעשו לנו בעיות והכל יהיה בסדר. הם יהיו בכפרים שלהם, אנחנו נחיה פה, לא צריך להיות ביחד והכל בסדר.
I think also that every Arab that doing a terrorism attack, we have to kill him, and not because he's an Arab, because he's a terrorist. I think you should also kick out the family, because it all begins with chinuch. I would say
education.
Whatever they teach the kids does. You know, it's families.
I'm think that we need to.
War between countries, you know, if they're going to throw rockets, we're going to throw one big one and done.
I don't think there's any answer to it. There's only one way, like, I would carpet bomb them.
I think that we're miserable. The Arabs make a piguim and we need to kill Arabs.
This is not right. Get them out of here.
This is Soros. This is Soros. You gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people. The creator of heaven and earth gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people for an eternal inheritance. That's not Zionism. That's Judaism. This is Jewish identity that they're at war with.
On MSNBC's Morning Joe, a police officer provided this evidence that they were dealing not with students, but with professionals.
Tell us about this change.
Yeah, so when we entered Hamilton Hall, this is not what students bring to school.
Okay, this is
Don't
what
think so.
professionals bring to campuses and universities. These are heavy industrial chains that were locked with bike locks, and this is what we encountered on every door inside of Hamilton Hall.
You even heard the host say, oh yeah, that is not the kind of thing that a student would have, right? That was in fact a pretty bog standard heavy duty bike lock. And what that officer showed looks a lot like this one sold by Kryptonite, right? Normal bike lock. And you can see, or can you guess in fact, where I found that image? Well, it was attached to a post from 2020 by the Columbia University Public Safety Department. So the post calls it Kryptonite's best lock, not even Superman can defeat. And it offers Columbia students a discount code. So that cop was sort of there on MSNBC, taken incredibly serious by the hosts of Morning Joe, saying this is evidence these people weren't students, because what kind of student would have this heavy-duty chain? Well, it's the kind of heavy-duty chain that Columbia University had been advertising to their students, and in fact giving them a discount code to buy. Completely ridiculous. Of course, though, it wasn't enough to stop the NYPD pulling this stunt at a press conference.
Of the city of New York will never be locked out, and we will always work together to keep our city safe.
It's a bike lock, right? We'll never be locked out. We'll always stick together. These terrorists with this bike lock, which was advertised to them by the university. The actual mayor of New York was sitting next to that guy, right? These are supposed to be serious politicians, and they're waving around a bike lock saying, these people we're dealing with, they aren't just normal students who want peace in the Middle East. These are really violent, aggressive people, but our good, brave police went in there and kicked them out despite all of these, he's talking about it as if they're weapons, right? It's a bike lock. Completely bizarre.
But you'll find that it's actually the Israeli, the pro-Israel demonstrators who are engaging in racism. Take a look at this. So, again, Sharmuta is a lady of the night with a promiscuous nature. It basically means whore. And I'm laughing because it's the Israelis, they can't even come up with their own swear words. They have to take them from Arabic and put them in Hebrew, which is really hilarious.
Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. Hey, you all do shit, keep it going. Do some shit. Let's go.
Spitting on people, how nice. Here we've got more classy behavior. So you heard what she said. She said, I hope you get raped.
Fuck Palestine! Palestine to my dick!
What do you think the response should be from Netanyahu and the military to Gaza?
Kill all Palestinians! All of them! Not one left from the river to the sea, Palestine will be deceased! And Israel need to do like this. You see? Now Gaza. Like this. Gaza need to do like this. Or like this, but all this Jewish. Two options.
What do you think the response should be to Gaza?
We gotta wipe them off the fucking map.
I'm
talking about every fucking flatten them like a parking lot.
Yeah, wait.
Flatten them out once and for
There's
all.
nothing else you can do. They proved to us that there's nothing else you can do. We tried, and
we tried everything. It doesn't work. We have to wipe them flat off the fucking map, like a fucking parking lot. I'm not stopping till all Arabs are wiped out.
I think now it's the time that we need to erase Gaza. There is people inside, our people inside, that kidnap, and now we need to kill all of them and free Israel. All of their belief is killing Jewish and killing and murder our people.
Flatten it. Flatten Gaza.
So he's pointing at them and saying animal, 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 rats in tunnels.
Enjoy being a
genocidal psychopaths. Fuck you, you guys are gonna die in hell.
They can't do anything unless they tell you and portray to you that they're the ultimate victims, right? They are always the ultimate victims, even when they are committing genocide, when they are occupying.
You're committing genocide! Kill all of you bastards! Yeah, kill everyone! That's what he just said. I'm a alumni, you fucking nigger! Fucking nigger! Shut the fuck up! I'm never gonna forget you, you fucking nigger!
But remember, this is not racism. The Palestinians, they're racist, they're anti-Semitic. You need to focus on them. Zionists will accuse you of being racist, and that of which they are guilty. For we all know every Zionist accusation is a confession. For we all know every Zionist accusation is a confession. For we all know every Zionist accusation is a confession. And they took over, the students took over Hamilton Hall, which was done in 1968 as well. Okay, so it's a flashback to 1968, and they unfurl this banner. So let me give you some context. Why Hinds Hall instead of Hamilton's Hall? Well, and you'll see this now in CNN how wild they are. They've named this, okay. So here she is, okay? It's named after Hind Rajab. It's a girl that was killed in Palestine. I think she was about 6 years old, okay? She was killed this January so she was 6 years old. And she was killed by the Israelis after they killed the rest of her family. And that's who they named the hall after. Now look what CNN had to say. Just listen to what they have to say.
16. Good morning to all of you. Some pretty stunning images coming to us overnight, Evan. We also are just learning at this hour that banners have been hung from the hall. They read Hind's Hall and Intifada. Hind is a reference to a woman who was killed in Gaza. Intifada, of course, a reference to uprising, violent struggle.
A woman. Now, why would you call a 6-year-old girl a woman? That seems a bit weird. Just the most charming people. The most charming people that you've ever seen. So let's begin with the Israeli finance minister. And let's see what he had to say. Okay?
תראו חברים, יש בעזה 2 מיליון נאצים שרוצים לשחוט, לאנוס ולרצוח כל יהודי. אני לא רוצה עכשיו להיכנס בהרחבה, מי שרוצה יכול למצוא פוסטים שכתבתי בעניין הזה ב-2017.
כן, בעיניך כל אחד ואחד מהם הוא נאצי שרוצה לרצוח יהודים שם ברצועת, כל אחד ואחד? מתוך
הרוב המוחלט של אוכלוסיית עזה גדל.
Even the Israeli journalist who's interviewing him is like, you're full of it. I mean, they've just uncovered mass graves with people killed, executed with their hands tied behind their backs, blindfolded in Gaza. And he's calling Palestinians Nazis. Wow. That's just funny.
כן, בעיניך כל אחד ואחד מהם הוא נאצי שרוצה לרצוח יהודים שם ברצועת, כל אחד ואחד? מתוך
הרוב המוחלט של אוכלוסיית עזה גדלה בתודעת שנאה תהומית למדינת ישראל. אני מזכיר לך.
So he says the vast majority of the population grew up with a visceral hatred towards the state of Israel. Yes, and how can you blame them? I mean, if I lived in Gaza, I'd also hate your fucking guts. You're despicable. Look how you treat people in Gaza, then you will know why they hate you.
The Israeli society overwhelmingly supports the genocidal war in Gaza. It's about 95% of the Jewish Israelis, 95. I have the statistics right here. About 60% of Israeli Jews oppose any humanitarian aid to Gaza, impose on the issue of the war. On this issue of the war, only 1.8%, that was in October, 7%, that was in December, and 3.2%, that's January, of Jewish Israelis believed the IDF was using too much firepower in Gaza. So when people want to lay the blame for the insanity on Netanyahu, that is a misrepresentation of the facts. If there is no political opposition to be seen against Netanyahu, it's because The whole population agrees with what Netanyahu is doing.
And that's all how it began. There was no great intention to become a great yogi. There was no great intention to teach great dharma. But there was one thing which was very urgent. You come from Judo-Christian background. According to the Indian Swamis, you are untouchables. You don't know this. Yeah. You are scheduled caste, you are untouchable, you are lowest of the lowest of the lowest. You may think you are the great and all that, forget it. But to them, you are just nothing.
I wanted to tell a story about Jack Kornfield. You know, one of the things in Buddhism is there's no separate self. A lot of the suffering in the world that we identify with sort of autonomous, separate self. And Jack Kornfield tells a story when he met Kalu Rinpoche as a very eager student of Buddhism and wanted to use that opportunity. So he asked Kalu Rinpoche, can you, just in a few words, tell me what is the essence of Buddhism? And Kalu Rinpoche says, well, I could tell you, but you wouldn't believe me and it would take you a very long time to understand what I mean. And Jack said, please tell me anyway. And Kalu Rinpoche said, okay, you don't really exist. Which means not you don't exist, you know, something exists, but it's not what you think it is. It's not the body ego.
That ultimately ties into the long-term picture, I would argue, because the people who are pushing Malthusianism, all the Great Reset crowd, the Davos crowd, Jane Goodall, all those types, Harari, all of those people pushing Great Reset are the same ones that have a face, a veneer of democracy, liberalism, concern. Oh, we care about the environment. We care about immigrants. No, they don't. They're the same people who want the population scaled down 90%. There's not an actual concern. That's all for PR. That's a cloak, the liberal cloak, all the way back to what Obama deception, right? And yet it still fools all these people. These people think that the left cares about humanity. No, the left is a Malthusian cult, a death cult in its inner core. And it controls a giant golem zombie mind control being, this entity of all these people that are in this Borg hive that believe that, well, they're just basically completely controlled androids, right? I put up a video that humans are becoming robots. And he says, and human beings are essentially humanoids. He says they are not actually human anymore. And we have absolutely every intention of mutating them to no longer be human, he says. They will be cogs in this global technocratic system. He says that's the future, Beale. He's giving him the speech that social Darwinism is what runs the world. And that's the philosophy of the British Empire, right? They're the ones that gave us social Darwinism. And he says that we will rule because we have the Darwinian impetus to rule. And that rulership will be to create a completely homogenized, standardized humanity. In other words, everything that's in Brave New World, right? Because you don't have individuality in Brave New World. He says that the enemy here is the individual, Mr. Beale. The individual is the competitor to the global market that has to be stamped out. And we will homogenize human beings. And we will tranquilize them. And we will mutate them into being cogs. He says, you are a humanoid. You're not human anymore. The godlike status in place of media as an engine for mind control.
How did you manage to access all this information?
Electrical impulses. Every cell knows and talks to every other cell. They exchange 1,000 bits of information between them per second. Cells group together, forming a giant web of communication, which in turn forms matter. Cells get together, take on one form, deform, reform. Makes no difference, it's all the same. Makes no difference, it's all the same. Humans consider themselves unique, so they've rooted their whole theory of existence on their uniqueness. One is their unit of measure, but it's not. Uniqueness. One is their unit of measure, but it's not. All social systems we put into place are a mere sketch. 1 + 1 = 2. That's all we've learned. But 1 + 1 has never equaled 2. There are, in fact, no numbers and no letters. We've codified our existence to bring it down to human size.
But some governments and corporations, for the first time in history, have the power to basically hack human beings. But the big story of our era is the ability to hack human beings. And by this I mean that if you have enough data and you have enough computing power, you can understand people better than they understand themselves, and then you can manipulate them in ways which were previously impossible. This new era in which humans are now hackable animals. This new era in which humans are now hackable animals.
The handwritten sign was a tool. TV is a tool. The internet is a tool. Social media is a tool. At the end of the day, tools don't control us. We control them, and we can remake them. It's up to each of us to decide what we value, and then use the tools we've been given to advance those values.
Mark chapter 13, verse 20.
And except that the Lord had shortened those days, no flesh should be saved. But for the elect's sake, whom he hath chosen, he hath shortened the days.
Matthew chapter 24, verse 22.
And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened.
Revelation chapter 11, verse 18.
And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead that they should be judged, and that thou shouldst give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldst destroy them which destroy the earth.
Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 17.
Then he said unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Is it a light thing to the house of Judah that they commit the abominations which they commit here? For they have filled the land with violence, and have returned to provoke me to anger, and lo, they put the branch to their nose. Therefore will I also deal in fury.
Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 13.
Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and stablisheth a city by iniquity. Behold, is it not of the Lord of hosts, that the people shall labor in the very fire, and the people shall weary themselves for very vanity?
You come from Judo-Christian background. According to the Indian Swamis, you are untouchables. You don't know this. Yeah. You are scheduled caste, you are untouchable, you are lowest of the lowest of the lowest. You may think you are the great and all that, forget it. But to them, you are just nothing.
One of the best kept secrets of the birth of modern science is that it was founded by an angel. That the young René Descartes was whoring and soldiering his way across Europe as a 21-year-old in a Habsburg army, and one night in the town of Ulm in southern Germany, he had a dream. Strange that this would be the birthplace of Albert Einstein some 200 years later. But Descartes had a dream, and an angel appeared to him in the dream, and the angel said, "The conquest of nature is achieved through measurement and number." And he said, "I got it. Modern science. I'll go do it." And he did. He did. And that was the method for over 250 years of the conquest of nature.
So how did Descartes come upon this new rational foundationalist philosophy? Of course, the answer we expect is, well, he arrived at the system through rational deduction of simpler and simpler principles that were vetted through logic and mathematics. And if you were to believe that, you'd be wrong. No, it wasn't through rational deduction. It was through mystical dreams. Yeah, mystical dreams. If we can say that Descartes developed the foundations of modern science and philosophy, we might also say that the foundations for those foundations were nothing other than mystical insight, a kind of gnosis. So yes, behind the foundations of modern science and philosophical rationalism are a series of 3 dreams that Descartes had on the night of November 10th through 11th, 1619. So what do we know about these 3 dreams? So in about the week building up to the dreams, Bayet accounts that Descartes was experiencing a kind of building up sense of what Descartes and Bayet both called enthusiasm. Now, enthusiasm is the name of an early modern affect. It doesn't really exist. It's a sort of an emotion that sort of went extinct, which is interesting. But this idea of enthusiasm was marked by an overwhelming sense of inspiration and sometimes resulted in ecstatic outbursts. Of course, the word actually has a Greek origin. It literally means something like to have the being of a god inside you, and it was typically associated with spiritual possession by the god Apollo. So for several days prior to the night of the dreams, Descartes recounts having this mounting sense of enthusiasm. And again, enthusiasm doesn't just mean to be excited about something in the early modern period. It's as if something were possessing him. And it's not uncommon, by the way, at this time to use the word enthusiasm to actually describe something like spirit possession. In many cases of the witch trials, enthusiasm was a marked symptom of being possessed. And the fact that Descartes admits to being filled with enthusiasm would actually look relatively negative to many of his contemporaries. So on the day of the dreams themselves, this enthusiasm had reached a kind of breaking point, and Descartes admits that he, quote, discovered the foundations of a wonderful science before going to bed. So at any rate, Descartes, filled with enthusiasm, and having discovered this wonderful new science, actually gets ready to go to bed, and it seems as if he knows that he's going to be visited in the night by some kind of breakthrough in his dreams. Bayet actually writes that, quote, he, meaning Descartes, adds that the genius which has excited in him the enthusiasm with which he has felt his brain heated since some time before had foretold these dreams to him before he went to bed, and human intelligence had played no part in it. That last line, that human intelligence had played no part in it, again speaks to the fact that Descartes thought that a kind of supernatural event was about to happen to him as he went to bed that night in November. He'd already had this mounting enthusiasm, he had made this enormous breakthrough, and he had the deep sense that he was about to be visited by something other than human intelligence in this dream. That Descartes had a series of dreams in which supernatural beings talked to him and revealed to him the fundamental truth of reality. So, in the famous heated room, Descartes went to bed on the night of the 10th and had a series of mystical dreams that fundamentally laid the foundations for modernity.
Perception must be judged by truth. Experience must be judged by truth. Absolute truth. Capital T. But that is an epistemic and metaphysical question. But all of modernity is built on the rejection of epistemical, metaphysical questions. So here we are presented with an immediate problem. The immediate problem of modern man versus the idea, the principle, the reality of truth, capital T. And what does almost everybody do? Relativism. It's all relative, dude. It's all relative, dude. It's all relative, bro. And so we could classify this as, again, epistemic relativism, subjectivism, pure subjectivism, naive skepticism, all of these, positivism, they're all kind of classed in the same. So they all ultimately mean the same thing. Nothing's true. And ultimately we understand this position begins, its starting point, its foundational presupposition is the negation of truth. But of course, that's contradictory, isn't it? Well, yeah, of course it is. Because in negating truth as my starting point, I have a truth. I have the truth, namely that there is no truth. But that's a truth claim. So it's contradictory from the outset. But to the fallen mind, so what? Cool. Life's mysterious, dude. Then they have to be consistent with that and admit that their discovery of that truth was not a real discovery. Their actions are not really theirs. They're not really that smart. They're not really anything. That's all illusory. And it was just determined. It's just chemical reactions. And even the meaning that they ascribe to their thoughts, their belief system, their claims, even that is also illusory. It's just in their head. It's just solipsism. Yes, exactly. Determinism is circular and it leads directly into solipsism, completely self-destructive as an ideology, completely self-contradictory as an ideology. And it's that's the end result precisely because it's a war on truth. Once you've discarded the idea of divine truth, there are these little cul-de-sacs that you can go into for a time period, and the generations since the revolutions have done this, of trying to find a means to live, find meaning, find happiness, organize society. But every one of these cul-de-sacs is a fraud. It's a deception. They collapse. They don't last. Pure agnosticism, naive empiricism, all of these nonsense positions, they just end up in solipsism. This is me and my mind, bro. You're just a manifestation of my mind, bro. And at that point, you might as well be taking DMT and believing whatever the elves tell you. Christianity is so retarded and superstitious. But the elves, bro, the elves blew my mind. I was under a shaman, man, who guided me through the elf dimension after I went through a long tunnel. It was the colon of the universe, and it farted me out to the elf land. So in vitalism, you kind of have this retreat into mysticism, the spiritual, the magical, the mystical, the occult mystic. And he says the great example of this would be W.B. Yeats. Yeats said, after reading Huxley and rationalists, he says, I detested them because I missed the simple animistic spiritualistic religion of my childhood, pagan, Celtic, demonic stuff. And if you read W.B. Yeats, he says the elves are real. So once again, we're back at the clockwork machine elves, because W.B. Yeats has whole essays on how the elves are real. Guess what? He was doing drugs. That's how the elves are real. And he was in Crowley's cult too, by the way. So he's picking basically occult types here. Here's where we get again, once again we come back. So after the vacuum of all this scientism and rationalism and, oh, we're going to have Neil deGrasse Tyson and, oops, here we are back at DMT, bro. Machine elves, bro. Come full circle. The revolution comes full circle. Oh, it was superstitious. Christianity was so dumb. And oh, look how evolution is so, oh, but wait a minute, evolution actually leads me to DMT and the machine elves, bro. And we're about, oh, but Christianity is still stupid. Oh, but maybe there's aliens, bro. There's no God, but the aliens put us here, bro. He also says, as a little side note, we live in an anti-intellectual century. Yes, exactly. Thank you. I felt a sigh of relief when he said that, because I feel that way. Here he says scientism. Scientism is the modern man's mythology. And the atheist worldview operates completely on the presupposition that there is no divine revelation. There is no truth. Hence, modern man's double-mind and double-think. It becomes circular. You become trapped. There is still the presupposition of ultimate truth, even in the midst of the denial of ultimate truth. And this applies to all of these dumb worldviews that try to make sense of this. Scientism, nihilism, progressivism, blah, 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 blah. All worldviews are based on presuppositions. It's unavoidable. You can't get away from it. That's why I didn't go into academia. I don't want to fit in with those idiots. I don't want to fit in with them. I don't want to fit in with a bunch of people who hate God. They're miserable people, especially professors. And I love the section where he goes off on academia. Boy, was that not accurate. He says academia isn't academia. It has nothing to do with scholarship. It's only there to socially engineer. Universities are there to indoctrinate people with relativism. What did the Enlightenment and the French Revolution birth? Liberalism, right? Everybody knows this. Commies, yes, but capitalists too. This is what nobody talks about. This is not hard to figure out. Why can't everybody talk about the fact? It's not even debated as a fact of history that communism and capitalism are both flavors of the Enlightenment and French Revolution. There's no debate on it, but you just can't talk about it. The Jacobins are just as bad as the Girondins. How many times have we talked about it? And Seraphim Rose is making that point. It is based on dialectics, and he points out that the dialectic of the revolutionary capitalist and the dialectic of the revolutionary communist, they're all based on Enlightenment principles. They're all based on getting rid of the old order. Who's the first phase? Well, it's the liberals. The demythologized hope in human progress liberal. We're going to have scientific socialism. We're going to have we believe in the power of man to erect a society based on freedom, truth, and the American way. And the republics and the democracies, what have they done? Nothing. They're nightmares. They're just as corrupt or worse than any of the monarchies. By the way, the Soviet experiment, the Bolshevik experiment, all the experiments of the 20th century, they're all based on Plato's ideals. Did you know what a Soviet is? A Soviet, it means republic. It's the same thing. he says that the revolutionary spirit is what has affected the entire Western world, and then by extension the rest of the world, since the time of the revolutions. The revolutionary ethos that's let loose, the revolutionary anti-old order, right? The ancient regime, the old regime, the removal of church and altar, crown and altar, right? The Masonic dictum, get rid of crown and altar. And that's unfortunately the entire milieu into which we are born in the modern world. Man's problem is not logic, but another faith. Exactly, because all worldviews are based on faith. And the idols of our day, the religious, superstitious idols of our day, are Darwinism, evolutionary theory, transhumanism, secularism, humanism, liberalism, socialism, libertarian capitalism, anarcho-capitalism. All of these secular atheistic positions, they're all worthless. They're all wrong. They're all dumb. All of them. And they're all constructed within the last few centuries as part of the revolutions. All of them as part of the revolutions against the old order. And what do they culminate in? What does the Soviet cosmist have in common with the Ayn Randian John Galtist? The power of technology to save man and give him immortality, right? Look up Russian cosmism and look at how the Soviets had all these dumb paintings of, oh, we're going to be flying around in little Jetsons, you know, Foo Fighters, and we're going to, and it's all going to be a utopia, and Stalin's going to bring us this great utopia through Russian cosmism. And it was all nonsense. It was all stupid cheeseball posters from a Mystery Science Theater B movie. Even Huxley says in the introduction to Brave New World that Brave New World is the end result of all of the revolutions, from the Enlightenment to the Scientific Revolution, Reformation, all the way up through Bolshevik Revolution, all of them, French Revolution. The end result, the logic, even the people at the head of the revolution can tell you that the logic of the end result, the dark logic of all the revolutions, is the technocracy, the Brave New World. It's the final revolution. And the cronies in his circle, who were at the top of the pyramid, Bertrand Russell, Julian, him, they said this is the final revolution. They used the term final revolution. The final revolution is the revolution against man. Man is the last thing to be overcome. The final revolution is the revolution against man. Man is the last thing to be overcome. That's the same dark logic. It's the exact same pattern. All we're doing here is pattern recognition.
I'm constantly attacked for my Jewishness. You know a thing or two. Do you have any advice for what we can do? I've suggested an organization, getting 100 really good lawyers, not to let a single person get away with a single anti-Semitic act, because the police almost never prosecute. We'll sue them. We'll take away their car. Oh, interesting, because the police won't prosecute, so you're just going to go from legal repercussions. Take away their car, take away their apartment, bankrupt them, make them sleep on the street. I have no sympathy for an anti-Semite.
Well, there you have it. Okay, if Alan Dershowitz didn't exist, Adolf Hitler would have to invent him. Alan Dershowitz, frequent flyer on the Epstein Lolita Express, admits that he was on the island, admits that he was on the massage table, claims he still had his underpants on, but what do we know? He claims that it was an old lady and not an underage girl, but, you know, that's his testimony. What do we know? We won't find anything out. But in the meantime, he's going to go after anyone that he doesn't like. This is known as lawfare. This is a man who's not only a lawyer, maybe still is, a professor of law at Harvard University. And a man like this should be disbarred, because he's using the law not as a way of maintaining order in our republic, but as a way of punishing his enemies. And this is a classically Jewish move. Roberta Kaplan has in common with Alan Dershowitz is that they're both lawyers and they both use the law to punish people they don't like. But it turns out that when they get involved in the government, it's the same thing of Josh Hawley interviewing Merrick Garland. Okay? He's the Attorney General. He's the chief law enforcement official of the United States of America. And the reason that Josh Hawley was talking to him is because he did the same thing. He weaponized the law. It's lawfare. It's law warfare conducted by law. Merrick Garland, the Jew who's the head of the Justice Department, decided to use the Justice Department to go after people Jews don't like. And one of the biggest classes of people that Jews don't like is pro-lifers, Catholic pro-lifers with big families, Catholic pro-lifers with big families who stand in front of abortion clinics, that abortion is high on their list of priorities. Abortion is a Jewish sacrament. We have said this before. Last week, I began the program by saying the Indiana Court of Appeals finally agreed with Mike Jones. They gave a religious exemption to Indiana's abortion law to Jews, because abortion is a Jewish sacrament. And because abortion is a Jewish sacrament, if you're pro-life, you're a blasphemer. And if you're a blasphemer, you're going to be punished, and you're going to be punished now by the federal government. So let's another clip just to show you what we're up against here.
I am Jewish and proud because Jews have always done what's right. We've led the fight for gay rights. Harvey Milk fought to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation. Eddie Windsor was a leader in the fight for marriage equality. Miriam Ben Shalom challenged the ban on gay people serving in the military. We've helped lead the fight for racial justice. Our rabbis were BFFs with MLK. Together with Black leaders, Jews helped to establish over 20 HBCUs. During the Civil Rights Movement, Jews were disproportionately involved in the protests. We've led the fight for women's rights, for equal pay and the right to choose, and against discrimination in the workplace. Jews were also among the first on the ground in Turkey, Ukraine, and Haiti. In Judaism, when it comes to helping others, no action is too big or too small. The Jewish principle of Tikkun Olam tells us that we have the power to change the world, and there are so many ways to do that. And this is why I am Jewish and proud.
Well, there again, I couldn't have done a better job of explaining how Tikkun Olam is basically the right to promote the murder of the unborn, sodomy. We just go down the list here of all of these subversive movements that have basically destroyed our culture, and that's why she's Jewish and proud. These are the people that get to determine the way the law gets applied. These are the people who basically are holding your life in the balance. If you're on the wrong side of these people, they will have people like Alan Dershowitz or Roberta Kaplan come, and they will try to destroy you. There's something we have to contextualize this by talking about what was happening, let's say 50 years ago. What was happening 60 years ago? 60 years ago, we had Shemp versus School Board of Abington, which was the American Jewish Committee using Leo Pfeffer, their lawyer, to ban prayer in schools. This was the beginning. Another text of what was happening 50 years ago, maybe 10 years after that, but right around 50 years ago, you have Alan Dershowitz, again, the same guy now that wants to punish anyone's speech that the Jews deem offensive. He's on with William Buckley. You can watch it on YouTube, defending Deep Throat, which is a pornographic film. As free speech. Obscenity was never considered free speech until the Jews did it. So they break down the laws then, they break down this consensus, and then you're in a situation where once it gets broken down, now you have to accept Satanists or whatever else as part of your religion, or you have to accept a Jewish exception for abortion. This is the result of 60 years of Jewish legal activism that has been tolerated to the point where now it's a threat to everyone in the country. Anyone who runs afoul of these people can be ruined by these frivolous and vicious lawsuits. Ever since Roe versus Wade was overturned by the Dobbs decision, 400 Jewish organizations have announced that abortion is a fundamental Jewish value. Now, this is new. This is new. I was around in 1973 when Roe versus Wade got handed down by the Supreme Court. And at that time, the word Jew was never mentioned. We found out later that the whole abortion push came from Jews, specifically from New York and California, where it was controlled by the Jews. New York had two Jews, Bernard Nathanson and Larry Lader, but they were never identified as Jews. They were always identified. Nathanson was identified as a gynecologist. Okay, the other side was always identified as Catholics, and it was always a situation. This is New York Times. This is where they played it. that the Catholics were trying to impose their views on everyone else. Well, guess what happened? It turns out that there was a group that was trying to impose its views on everyone else, and they succeeded. It was the Jews. And for almost 50 years, we had the Jewish sacrament of abortion being imposed on this country. Now, wait a minute. Everybody, would scream. I've gotten people screaming at me on the internet. How dare you say that abortion is a Jewish sacrament? Well, guess what? The appeals court of the state of Indiana just proved that E. Michael Jones was right when he said abortion is a Jewish sacrament. This happened at an especially interesting time because if you were watching the drama that took place last week, we had a situation where Candace Owen blew up. The Daily Wire blew up. She's black, and she was talking about something or other. Christ the King, and suddenly it turned out that there's this big conflict, and so the rabbi comes on to set her straight. And in the middle of it, Candace says, wait a minute, you can't impose your religion on me. I have another religion. Your religion doesn't trump my religion. At that point, this entity, this category of the mind known as conservatism, blew up. It blew up because there was one thing that was holding this thing together. Ben Shapiro would talk about us, and it was known as Judeo-Christian morality. There is no such thing as Judeo-Christian morality. Okay? There is Jewish morality, and there is, if you want to call it Christian morality, but they're not the same thing. And the reason we know that is because the Jews themselves, 400 Jewish organizations, came out and announced that abortion is a fundamental Jewish value. And now we have the appellate court of the state of Indiana acting on this statement. And they are ratifying the fact that the Jewish religion has abortion as one of its fundamental Jewish values. Now, I've said before, okay, if abortion is one of your fundamental values, religious values, you do not worship Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews. Who do you worship? You worship Moloch. And you go back to those group of Jews. There was always a mixed bag. The Jews get out of Egypt. Moses takes them out. And before their feet are even dry from walking across the Red Sea, they're worshiping the golden calf. The golden calf is the symbol of Moloch. And how do you worship Moloch? You offer your child up as sacrifice. That's what it was. These are the descendants of Moloch. And now suddenly we have to accept their religion as normative for the state of Indiana. Now, this is too far. Program of the Democratic Party, which is identity politics, which means you had to be black or you had to be a homosexual, or, and this get back to this thing, you could be a feminist. And a feminist is, what is a feminist? It's basically a woman who had an abortion, pretty much, and who is consumed with guilt for having this abortion and doesn't know how to deal with it. And so she becomes politically mobilized, and we're going to make wrong right. That was one of the fundamental issues. It has destroyed American identity. And there's another even greater fiction below that, and that is called Judeo-Christian morality. That was the fiction that was the basis for conservatism. Ben Shapiro wrecked his own operation when Gaza happened. And he suddenly he can't control himself. He's not a conservative. He's a Jewish chauvinist who basically tries to hornswoggle a lot of people into thinking that he's a conservative. But when push comes to shove, he throws all pretense that there is some type of morality out there. He throws it to the wind and says basically the Jews can kill whoever they want because they're Jews. In other words, it's Jewish ethno-supremacy, which is the antithesis of the rule of law. It's Jewish privilege. It's not equality before the law. That he blew up his game. There's nothing he can say to get it back again. He destroyed his own game. And I think that the Holocaust narrative got dragged into the story of the genocide in Gaza. Basically, a number of articles got written by rabbis who said basically that so there were no innocent people in Dresden because they voted for Hitler. And so the firebombing of Dresden was justified. And so this is the type of moral theologian you're dealing with. So if the if the firebombing of Dresden is justified, of course, which it is not, it was a war crime, okay, then the carpet bombing of Gaza is justified because those people voted for Hamas. This is Jewish, this is Talmudic thinking. This is alien to rationality. This is not rational. You cannot get practical reason from a Jew. They have to struggle. They struggle with the idea of the law applying to everyone. They always have the sense that they have Jewish privilege and that whatever they say is true simply because they say it.
But with one important distinction, which is that they do not call them Jews. They will not call them Jews. They call them Israelis. And yeah, do you want to expand on that?
Well, if you're in America, you're allowed to call them neoconservatives, but you're not allowed to make the connection here. And the connection has to be made. So you're talking about, you're right, the major critique of behavior in Gaza is coming from the left. Okay, that's absolutely true. But there's another critique that is still struggling to emerge, and that is on the right. And that has also made significant progress. Now, the crucial issue here is abortion. Okay, so we have, in order to address this properly, you have to go from A to Z, abortion to Zionism, because it's the same group of people that are involved in both of these things, beginning with the overturn of Roe versus Wade, which is about 2 years ago now. What the immediate consequence of that was that 400 Jewish organizations said that abortion is a fundamental Jewish value. Now, just 2 days ago in Indiana, the Indiana Appellate Court gave Jews a religious exemption for abortion. So I started off way back then, 2 years ago, saying abortion is a Jewish sacrament, and everybody got mad at me. How dare you say this? Well, this Indiana Appellate Court just vindicated me and said I'm right, because they gave the Jews a religious exemption for abortion. So to get back to our discussion here, Ben Shapiro, I brought this up when Ben Shapiro came to South Bend, stood there and said, Ben, 400 Jewish organizations said that abortion is a fundamental Jewish value. This is a Right to Life banquet.
Hi, my name's E. Michael Jones. I'm the editor of Culture Wars magazine. I've been involved in this fight for over 40 years. Did sidewalk counseling in front of the old abortion clinic on St. Louis Boulevard. Knew a lot of the founding people on this organization, like Virginia Black and Charlie Rice. So I've been around for a while, and when Roe was overturned, suddenly there was a new wrinkle to this whole story. At this point, 140 Jewish organizations announced that abortion was a fundamental Jewish right.
It is not. I mean, I can give you the whole Jewish law breakdown right now. The bottom line is that Judaism is a pro-life religion with the possibility of what we would call in Hebrew a heter, which is essentially a dispensation. Right? Like you actually have to go to a rabbi for a dispensation on abortion, but I would say that the most famous rabbis in the 20th century, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Joseph Ber Soloveitchik, both of them believed in the full pro-life position. There's some fringe positions inside Judaism that suggest the opposite, but the bottom line is that it is not a violation of religious freedom to have a neutral statute that applies criminally across all people. That's not a violation of religious freedom. I mean, this is something that's been held repeatedly by the Supreme Court itself. So this notion that you have a religious freedom to get abortion, or that it's a religious act to be able to get an abortion, is kind of a wild claim. And by the way, the Jewish organizations that are pushing this, most of them don't even keep Shabbos. I mean, like, most of them don't keep kosher. Most of them don't do any of the actual Jewish statutory laws. Just here they've decided to stick their thumb in the pie. But it's a ridiculous claim legally, morally, Judaically. It has very little to support it.
So are these 140 Jewish organizations wrong when they say that?
Yes, they're dead wrong when they say that. And
why is it that so many of them say that then?
Because the vast majority of Jewish organizations don't know anything about Judaism.
He says, no, that's not true. Well, wait a minute, I said, Ben, are you the Pope? Are you the Jewish Pope that's going to excommunicate? This is a numbers game here. Okay? If 400 Jewish organizations say it's true, period. And the court just vindicated that. Their operation, the only possible conservative operation, is to have this political movement based on Judeo-Christian morality. And so it took a hit 2 years ago because immediately I asked, what's the Judeo-Christian position on abortion? There is none. There's a Jewish position which calls it a sacrament, and there's a Christian Catholic position which calls it an abominable crime. And that's it. There's no consensus. That was the first blow. The second blow comes when the Hamas invades Israel, October 7th. And Ben Shapiro throws all idea of moral consensus, all idea of moral behavior out the window. That is, Ben, stop. That's the basis of conservatism. That's the only basis you have at the Daily Wire to have your own operation. And you just threw it out. So between, as I said, it's from A to Z, from abortion to Zionism. The Jews have wrecked their own game because they can't constrain themselves. They can't contain themselves whenever something like Israel is under attack or when abortion is under attack. They can't control themselves. They have to freak out and make fools out of themselves and blow up their own operation.
Oh, that's quite interesting. We've been living through a time of rampant censorship, sort of the last decade, spearheaded by organizations like the ADL, which are Jewish, against men like you calling you anti-Semitic and wicked for saying things like abortion is a Jewish sacrament. And all that we really had to do was wait, because eventually they were going to prove it themselves. And when it comes to the Daily Wire, you said this. You said that basically this Jewish-Christian conversation that was started decades ago is now over. It's ended.
Right.
Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens going their separate ways.
Candace, I know you're a shiksa, and so I'll try to make it as simple as possible. You can't say that Christ is king, or whatever he said. And she said, you can't impose your religion on me. Well, that broke it. That broke it, because that's exactly what the whole Judeo-Christian conservative thing was. It was basically the Jews using conservatism as a stalking horse to get basically impose their religion, let's say the religion of Zionism on everyone, whereas the left-wing Jews had already used Roe versus Wade to impose the religion of abortion on everyone. They blew it up because that was the end of this Judeo-Christian consensus. If there's no Judeo-Christian moral consensus, there is no conservatism, and there's no America. Or let me put it this way. There is an America, but if the Jews insist on saying that abortion is a fundamental Jewish value and that Bibi Netanyahu can kill as many civilians as he wants to because they are Amalek, then the Jews have simply separated themselves from America. They are an alien body now in America. They do not belong to the great moral consensus that is the tradition of America, and they simply have to be excluded. So, okay, you had your chance, fellas, with conservatism. Now it's back to the ghetto. We got to create another ghetto for the Jews. The point here is, I've said it before, Jews cannot be citizens. We have what we've learned through the Biden's minion, 457 Jews running the Biden administration, is that Jews cannot represent the people of America. All they can represent is their own interest. And if you put them in positions of government, they will get the United States involved in wars for the benefit of Israel, which is what the Iraq war was, and what the Ukraine war is, and what the whole Israel thing is. Okay? They will not represent the people of the United States of America. They will take the law. This is Merrick Garland, the Jew who's the head of the Justice Department. He will use the law now to punish people Jews don't like pro-lifers, Catholic pro-lifers. And when Josh Hawley brought that up, he said, oh, kind of caught him. Oh, I have relatives who died in the Holocaust. You can't say that to me. So this whole thing is wearing out. It's wearing out. It's over. You know, it's getting worse and worse. Now Christ the King is anti-Semitic. What isn't anti-Semitic? The point is that we have to come to the conclusion that anything Jews don't like is anti-Semitic. And that keeps expanding. It's across the entire political spectrum, and it's destroying what's left of America. Because, as I said, we don't have an established church. You know, we broke with that when we left England. We don't have a culture. We don't have anything but the ability to say what's on our mind because it's guaranteed by the First Amendment, and that's under attack.
Yeah, that's because Judeo-Christian is an oxymoron.
Absolutely.
But OnlyFans is owned by a Jew. And
who is the biggest contributor to IPAC, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is going on Ben Shapiro's network, which kind of shouldn't be happening, because he's got to play this game where he's masquerading as Judeo-Christian, which we just said is an oxymoron. Well, he has to employ Christians. He's a Jew, and he can't employ too many Jews, else it'd be obvious. So he employs Candace Owens, Matt Walsh, and Michael Knowles as 3 Christians. And then they end up having conversations, from what I can see, about how Jesus Christ can save women from OnlyFans.
Yeah. Well, as you said, if you connect the dots, you start to see a pattern of behavior, like the fact that the owner of Pornhub is a rabbi. So you would do this. When I had these conversations with Charles Moskowitz, he would invariably say, well, they're not real Jews. They're not real. So I said to Charles Moskowitz, well, what, are you the Pope? Are you the Jewish Pope that gets to determine who's a real Jew or not? You can't say this. You can't say this because you're in a very distinct minority, and the overwhelming number of Jewish organizations support this type of thing and support it. There was an interesting video that was put out by the World Jewish Congress, and it's some vapid young lady who begins by saying, Jews are always right. Jews are always right. And what do you mean by that? Well, they were right on abortion. They're right on gay marriage. They're right on, it goes down the list. Well, these are all the things that are destroying our culture. Did you understand that, honey? Do you think everybody is as stupid as you are? Well, that means if you're not going to bend, you're going to break. Because sooner or later, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And if you're constantly ignoring people, who want some type of peaceful solution, who want some type of dialogue, you're going to create violence. And this is exactly what happened with Ben Shapiro. He was created, the Daily Wire was created to basically create solidarity with a certain group of Gentiles, the conservative group. And so Ben Shapiro would do this dutifully and say, yeah, I'm against abortion. And then you get the sense that reinforces the Judeo-Christian narrative. It gives you the illusion that it exists out there. And then he goes crazy with Gaza. And the whole thing goes down the drain because he couldn't control himself. That's simple. He didn't have enough rational behavior to say, to argue from principle, like murder is wrong. It's wrong whether it's done by an abortion suction machine or by an F-16, but it's wrong, and they couldn't do it. And because they couldn't do it, they broke. Instead of bending, they broke. And what broke was the Daily Wire.
Yeah, and to make it clear, we're not saying that this is genetic, it's not DNA, it's rejection of Logos, because it sounds like there's an awful lot of blame being put on the Jews right now. So I want to switch and put blame on the Christians, professing Christians I've seen, that make up a huge amount of the commentators that I'm sort of adjacent to, who are behind Israel. And I'm actually putting the genocide to one side for a minute and talking about just the state of Israel and the very concept of it. And it blows my mind that so many people that claim to be Christian and go to church and all the rest of it don't understand that the physical nation state of Israel, full of Jews, i.e. people that did not accept the Messiah, is a blasphemous entity. And the idea of being behind it and these being our allies, if you are a professing Christian, is complete and utter nonsense that I could explain it to an atheist, that the very people that rejected the Messiah, who is the living God that you guys are supposed to follow, well, you're supposed to now stand in reverence and behind and as permanent allies to the people that rejected him and have now set up camp in his birthplace for only them. Like, it is so profoundly blasphemous and illogical that I think you wouldn't even have to be a Christian to actually understand it. Just from a basic logic standpoint, it's so ridiculous. So I'm going to call out every commentator that is adjacent to me that calls himself Christian that isn't talking about this issue right now because it's so enormous.
Well, I had this conversation with a podcast yesterday. The guy's a younger guy. Of course, everybody's young compared to me now, but he was talking about his father. So he's like 50 years old. His father is my age. He's 76 years old. And he's saying he simply cannot talk to his father about what is happening in Israel, in Gaza, because his father was raised as an evangelical on the Scofield Bible. In other words, on dispensationalism. And the key point of the Scofield Bible is that the people who call themselves Jews are the children of Moses. That's not in the Bible. The exact opposite is in the Bible. So I said, well, tell your father to read the gospel according to St. John, and you'll see that there was a big fight there about the people who called themselves Jews and Jesus Christ. And it was over whether they had sacred DNA or not. Now, the traditional theology was always that because the Jews rejected Christ, they lost their position. It's in the parable of the wicked husbandman. It's clearly stated there, where the owner has a vineyard, and he points these people to manage the vineyard. They don't own the vineyard; they're going to manage the vineyard. And so he comes back and says, I'm back. It's time to give it up. He sends his messengers, and they kill the messengers. So they're the prophets. And then he thinks, well, I'll send my son. Well, they killed the son. Well, who are we talking about now? Who killed the son? It's obviously the Jews. And it says at the end of the parable, it says the Jews understood this, and they were furious at Christ for saying this. This is all blotted out from this large group of people in America that are called evangelicals, who now say that Benjamin Netanyahu is perfectly justified in doing what he is doing because of their reading of Numbers and the story of Joshua. Well, wait a minute. He's not Joshua. What? But he's acting as if he is. He is now using the term Amalek to describe Palestinians. Amalek means we can kill you. This is the story. So God tells Joshua to exterminate the Canaanites. Okay, if God says it, you got to do it. But that doesn't mean you're Joshua. And I mentioned the fact that I went to high school a mile away from where Benjamin Netanyahu went to high school. And that's not Tel Aviv, that's Philadelphia. So who gave this Philadelphian the right to take over Palestine? These are the questions we have to ask, and we have to disentangle this narrative from the Bible because it doesn't apply. It simply doesn't apply.
Well, no, it doesn't apply, and it should be quite obvious that it doesn't apply. I've been aware that the evangelical Christian Zionist thing, the dispensationalist thing in America is a huge and bizarre problem, but I didn't think it was a problem in the UK, and I'm still not actually sure if it is, because I don't know what sect they tend to be professing Catholics and things like that. I'm like, okay, this is fairly new for me. I've only been interested in Christianity for a few years, and already I can see that this is blatant blasphemy and hypocrisy from people that claim to have been in this their whole life. And to be honest, I'm getting quite angry about it.
Yeah, there's a Catholic version of this. It's not the Scofield Bible. That's the evangelical problem. That's the source of the evangelical problem. But there is a Catholic version of this, and it goes back to Vatican II, the statement on non-Christian religions. It's called Nostra Aetate, and it says the church opposes all forms of anti-Semitism. Now, what they didn't do is define anti-Semitism. What is it? I mean, yeah, I'm against it, but what is it? And if you had asked those people at the council, if you asked the bishops, they were the ones who had to ratify it, they would have all said it's a form of racial biological determinism. Because that's when the term was created. It's a new term. It was created in 1871 by Wilhelm Marr, who did not like theological categories, who was swept up in the whole Darwin craze because that's what was going around in 1871. And he meant biological determinism. Well, obviously that can't apply because all of the people at the time of the crucifixion, both pro-Jesus and anti-Jesus, all had the same DNA. So it has no meaning whatsoever. Now, if you're saying that, okay, that you Catholics are anti-Semitic, no, that's wrong. Okay. Now, is the church anti-Semitic? No, that's impossible for reasons I just said. Is the church anti-Jewish? Well, yeah, it is, because it has to be. Because this is the fundamental turning point of human history, where one group of Jews accepted Jesus Christ and the other group rejected him. The only criterion that separates them is theology and its acceptance of Logos or rejection of Logos. So the church has to be anti-Jewish, because the Jews are the people who killed Christ, and they are enemies of the entire human race. And that's what St. Paul said. And nothing any bishop is going to say in order to be irenic is going to change that fact. And so that's what's got to work itself out in the Catholic Church at this point.
I've noticed that there's a lot of confusion so you'll see this alliance between these professing Christians that support Israel and like atheist classical liberals. They tend to be in conversation a lot, and they'll agree on Israel because they see Muslims as a great religious threat. And then you also have this, you've got the left wing where these very good conversations about Gaza and Israel's brutality and barbarism are going on, but they are called Israelis. And it's because if you don't have a religious worldview or a theological worldview, then what are the Jews? They're an ethnic group or a race, but you can't single people out for that. You can't be racist if you're on the left, so they can't talk about Jews, because what are they? They're an ethnic group of people, a race. You can't be racist. We can't talk about Jews. We have to talk about Israelis. And then I think over here on this sort of right-wing we support Israel side, with this where you'll get atheists and professing Christians having a friendly banter over this genocide that's going on. They also, I don't really believe these Christians, or I don't believe that they're looking at the world with the same lens as I am. I know that they're not, because they're not talking theologically. They must still be seeing Jew as a category of an ethnic category or a racial category. They're not actually viewing it as a theological category. So that's why I say I don't really trust you when you say you're Christian, because you're using the word Jew inappropriately. According to your own belief system, that word means a person who has rejected your belief system. And so an alliance is going to be inevitably impossible. But yeah, that's a problem, is you cannot discuss the issue at all from any perspective, left through right, without discussing it theologically rather than racially.
Right. You're absolutely right. And you're also right by saying that this is a category problem. We have the main objection Jews have to the Gospel of St. John is the fact that he uses the term the Jews. He says that this is a category. This is a category of the mind. I've had discussions with people, and they say whenever I say the word the Jews, it's always a category of my mind because I'm an anti-Semite. What the Gospel of St. John does is, no, this is the category of reality. There is a group called the Jews, okay? It's not all Jews. That's obvious from the Gospel. The Blessed Mother did not cry out, crucify him, okay? And she was a Jew, okay? So it's not all Jews. It's a political entity. It was always a political entity made up of leaders and followers who get mobilized for political purposes. Now, whether it was the Sanhedrin back then or whether it's IPAC or the ADL right now, that's what the Jews is. And what you see here is basically you're not allowed to have that category. If you say the Jews, Dave Chappelle made a joke out of this at that famous monologue he did on Saturday Night Live. Two words you could never bring together, the and Jews, which means you cannot form the proper category to identify your opponent in this struggle. So as soon as you say the Jews did this, someone will say, well, I know a Jew who is against abortion. And I know a Jew that supports Palestine. Yeah, of course, you're going to find Jews like that. But that doesn't change the fact that there is a political entity known as the Jews, and they have enormous political power right now. And so the fundamental political issue of our age is whether we can identify that group of people and propose some type of opposition to that group of people. Because all the other stuff, liberal, conservative, they all believe the same thing. They're all getting money from the same group of people. The fundamental issue is, can we have a political movement that will oppose Jewish control of our culture, that will free us, the non-Jews, Americans who are not Jews, from the threat, the constant threat hanging over our heads, that these people can destroy our lives if we disagree with them.
Let's go to the history of Christian Zionism. So we know about how Zionism, specifically with activist organizations such as AIPAC, which is the Israeli lobby, the ADL, other organizations, they use money and influence to transform even Western political parties, Western institutions into tools for advancing the interests of Israel and maybe Jewish interests more broadly speaking. So this is something that is acknowledged. You know, you can read John Mearsheimer's book, The Israeli Lobby, for example. And in the US and the UK, this is where it's the most obvious, but basically throughout the West, we see this. You have progressive liberal parties like the Democrats or the Labor parties. They're heavily pro-Israel, pro-Zionists. Then you have the conservative political parties, the Republicans or the Tories, and they're also heavily pro-Zionist. So these parties are supposed to be on different sides of the spectrum, but there's a consensus when it comes to Israel. So just as the Zionists have worked to transform the field of politics, they have also been working to transform the field of religion. And they have targeted Christianity for many years, many decades. They are also targeting Islam. They've been targeting atheism as well in order to create this kind of Zionist Christianity, Zionist Islam, and Zionist atheism. So today, for the rest of the show, we're going to talk about the history of Christian Zionism, and then in the following episode that we're going to have later in the week, inshallah, we're going to look at Islamic Zionism and how that's been developed. We're going to look at, like the Abrahamic family house and things of that nature, the Abraham Accords. But first today, let's talk about Christianity. So there are two components of this story. There's the Catholic component and there is the Protestant component. And the thing about Christianity is that Christianity has a history of being anti-Jewish. This is because of the Christian belief, the traditional Christian belief, that Jews rejected Jesus Christ as the Messiah, and that Jews were hostile to Jesus and plotted to kill him. That is the traditional Christian belief. And in addition to the belief that God has canceled the covenant that he had with the Jewish people and instead made a covenant with the Christian people. And I'll elaborate on that in a moment. But you have this idea now, instead of the West being a Christian civilization, the West is a Judeo-Christian civilization. This concept of Judeo-Christian has been a big change in the West's understanding of itself, and it is also due to Zionist influence. The West is a Jewish homeland, and you might think that this is a contradiction. It should be seen as a contradiction because the claim by Zionists is that Israel is the Jewish homeland. So how can the West also be a Judeo-Christian civilization? The thing about Christianity historically and traditionally, it's been very anti-Jewish. And this is represented by many verses in the New Testament that speak against Jews. So 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. And there's no denying that the Catholic Church is one of the most powerful and persistent religious organizations in human history. But, you know, all of that tradition of the Catholic Church, so much of the Catholic tradition has been canceled, has been amended, reformed, in large part because of what's called the Second Vatican Council of the 1960s. So these are ecumenical councils. But at Vatican II, or the Second Vatican Council, the Church amended many fundamental Christian teachings in keeping with liberal notions of progress, science, human rights, and most importantly, the Church relinquished its traditional support for theocracy, its support for limitations on free speech, its support for blasphemy punishments, and its support for religious wars. So all of these things that we found in the Catholic tradition have been nullified basically by Vatican II. So theocracy, you know, rule by the Church or under the influence of the Church, this is something that was undermined by Vatican II. Restrictions on free speech, obviously found in Islam, found in many religions, found in Catholicism for sure. You had the Index of Prohibited Books, for example, from the Catholic Church. Well, that's a limitation on freedom of speech and freedom of thought. Vatican II undermines that. Blasphemy punishments, such as the Inquisition, the auto da fe, these were canceled or undermined. The morality of them or the legitimacy of them were undermined by Vatican II and the Crusades. Religious war, you know, conquest, religious conquest. This was also undermined by Vatican II. So this is the Church becoming liberalized, the Church reforming in accordance with religious freedom, secular governance, liberal norms. And obviously, since Vatican II of the 1960s, the Catholic popes have continued to liberalize. So there was an apology that was issued by the Church for its persecution of Galileo due to his scientific arguments against the geocentric model. So this was in contradiction with the Catholic doctrine or traditional Christian doctrine of a geocentric model in favor of a heliocentric model. You also have Pope Francis, who he began his tenure as Pope in 2013, and he's been steadily affirming different kinds of human rights doctrines, specifically involving LGBT rights. He's also rejected the death penalty. So this is all new stuff. This is a continuous reformation or liberalization, rather, of the Catholic Church since the Vatican II. So a lot of changes in Vatican II pertain to Judaism. The Catholic Church historically has tried to combat Judaism and place limitations on Jews and Jewish figures, Jewish power. And this is why Zionists have been very intent on targeting the Catholic Church and to change the Catholic Church's position regarding Israel, regarding Judaism, etc. So the traditional Catholic doctrine, as we said, is very critical of Judaism, and this is reflected in, for example, the early church fathers like St. Gregory of Nyssa. And St. Gregory has some very anti-Jewish things to say, anti-Semitic things to say. He says Jews are slayers of the Lord, murderers of the prophets, enemies of God, haters of God, adversaries of grace, enemies of their father's faith, etc. This is in Homilies on the Resurrection. Gregory of Nyssa says this. And you have many statements like this from popes, so papal authority supporting anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic views. There is a long history of this. So Christian anti-Semitism in the church is much worse than you thought. Even Christians will acknowledge this. So you can read about this history. So this is part of the reforms. So at the time, leading up to the 1960s, you had organizations like the ADL, the American Jewish Committee, the World Jewish Congress. These were activist organizations that were pressuring the church, the Catholic Church. You also had activists like Jules Isaac. I'll bring you his picture so you can see. Here's Jules Marx Isaac. He died in 1963. You also have Abraham Joshua Heschel, who died in 1972. But these two activists, Jewish activists, were particularly effective in exerting pressure through media companies and through lobbying politicians to attack the Catholic Church and call it an immoral, anti-Semitic, hateful institution and demanding change. So in response to this intense lobbying, the Catholic Church in Vatican II renounced its traditional criticisms of Jews and Judaism, and it embraced this new idea that Jews don't actually need Jesus for salvation. Jews are saved because of the Old Covenant. There's no new covenant for Jews, and they should not be blamed for conspiring or plotting to kill Jesus. So this is the position that the church adopted in its reform in Vatican II. And this declaration from the church is known as Nostra Aetate. This was in 1965 that Nostra Aetate was proclaimed. So lobbying pressure on the church has continued. You know, it didn't end there. And the church is constantly being attacked, and demands for the church to disavow its entire history, basically. Disavow the popes, disavow the church fathers, disavow all of this. So to address this constant pressure, since the 1970s, the Catholic Church has held interfaith dialogue. These initiatives, which are regular events basically, and there are continuing committees and organizations and institutions that are devoted to bringing Catholics and Jews together to discuss how to improve mutual relations. So this is the attempt by the Catholic Church to heal the wounds, basically, and to self-reflect on its history of anti-Semitism, to reform itself. But there's a kind of hypocrisy, if we have to be honest about it. There's a kind of hypocrisy in forcing Catholics to change their traditional doctrines and ignore the other side of the equation. Because the reality is, there are many anti-Christian beliefs within Judaism. And if you've been following me on X, for example, I've pointed out passages within the Jewish religious texts that will claim, for example, that Jesus Christ is burning in hell in a vat of excrement. This is found in the Talmud. You also have the belief that Jesus was born because of adultery, that Mary, his mother, committed adultery with a Roman soldier, and that's how Jesus was conceived. This is also found in the Talmud. You also have Jewish supremacist beliefs that are based on the Hebrew Bible and are also found in the Torah. Many passages which describe non-Jews or Gentiles as being subhuman or being less than human or being akin to animals. So, and this is also found in Jewish law as well, traditional Jewish law, that says that Jews are obligated to slay idolaters and to destroy idolatry, specifically Christianity. This is Jewish law found in, for example, the Mishnah Torah. So you have all of these anti-Christian doctrines found in traditional Judaism, but Jews are not being forced to reform or to disavow these texts, to disavow Maimonides, you know, their topmost theologian. They're not being required to expunge these doctrines and these beliefs from their texts. So it seems kind of hypocritical for them to demand the Catholic Church to do this song and dance to atone for its anti-Semitic sins when there is no reciprocity on the other side when it comes to these Jewish texts and these Jewish beliefs. And these are not like antiquated beliefs. You know, if you look at many of the rabbis in Israel today, they are teaching these texts, they are teaching these doctrines without a whiff of embarrassment or self-consciousness. This is what they believe. They are very anti-Christianity and anti-Jesus Christ. So they're not apologetic about it at all when you go to the traditional Jewish institutions within Israel and some of the Orthodox institutions within the West as well. So what kind of interfaith dialogue is this? It's very one-sided. So that's the history with Catholicism. Now let's look at Protestantism, the other major branch of Christianity. And the Protestant history with anti-Semitism is similar to the Catholic history, like very anti-Semitic. Martin Luther, the father of the Protestant Reformation, is often accused of being the biggest anti-Semite in history. So you can see how this is a serious concern, given how Protestants are, you know, numbering in the hundreds of millions in the world, that there would be a interest in moderating their views or reforming their views on Judaism. And that is exactly what happened. So beginning in the 20th century, this reform started to take place. And to understand what this reform of Protestantism means, we have to understand the doctrines of suppressionism and dispensationalism. So like Catholicism, traditional Protestantism endorses supersessionism or replacement theology. I referred to it earlier in the stream. And this is the doctrine that God has replaced the covenant that he had with Jews with a covenant with the Christian church. So the old covenant has been superseded. That's where supersessionism comes from. They were the chosen people of God, but now Christians are the chosen people of God, and the church is the new covenant that God has. So it's been superseded. The old covenant has been superseded. This covenant is important. Why? Because it comes with God's support and his blessings. It also comes with the biblical promise of the land of Israel. So the land of Israel is for the chosen people. The traditional doctrine is that the chosen people are Christians, so Christians are entitled to the promised land of Israel, greater Israel, that is described as an inheritance from God. So when traditional Christians would read the Old Testament, they viewed this as being a promise to them, not a promise to Jews. So this is part of supersessionism. Also, the Mosaic Law was superseded. Many Christians take that aspect of supersessionism, that, okay, the Mosaic Law is no longer applicable. And this is, in some of the debates, I point out this kind of double standard or inconsistency of Christians, where they will acknowledge part supersessionism, but not the whole part of it. So they'll still be in support of Zionism. Like, who's this guy? Googling philosophy or inspiring philosophy? Like, he's a hardcore Zionist, pro-Zionist. It's like going on stream and defending the IDF and defending the Talmud. So he's a hardcore Zionist. But he also believes that, well, the old law, the Mosaic Law, is no longer applicable. It's been superseded by a new covenant. So that this is an inconsistency from the part of some of the Zionist Christians. But the contrary doctrine is dispensationalism. So that's saying that God's covenant with the Jews has not been superseded. It's not been canceled out. It's still valid. It's still there. Jews are still God's chosen people. They enjoy God's support and blessings. And the land of Israel, that's promised to Jews, not Christians. And by the way, Jews can be saved without accepting Jesus Christ. Turns out they actually reject Jesus Christ, and they consider him to be, all kinds of mean things that they say about him and his mother. So obviously Zionists are going to prefer dispensationalism, because the important part is the promised land. Who does the promised land belong to? It belongs to the Jewish people. Supersessionism, meanwhile, is considered by Zionists to be anti-Semitic. This is hate. This is the epitome of hate. This doctrine of supersessionism, that God superseded his covenant with the Jews, and he put that covenant with the church. This is anti-Semitism. So over the course of the 20th century, dispensationalism has been promoted, and this started with this Schofield Reference Bible. So some of you may have heard of the Schofield Bible. I think Eddie of the Dean Show had at least one or maybe even multiple videos discussing the Schofield Bible. Check out Eddie of the Dean Show and his channel for more information on that. Oh, here's a picture of Schofield, if you didn't know. And here is the verse that is often cited in Genesis. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and people on earth will be blessed through you. So Schofield comments on this, and he gives this kind of dispensationalist reading. So he says, I will bless them that bless thee. Hopefully you can read that. He says, in fulfillment closely related to the next clause, and curse him that curseth thee. Wonderfully fulfilled in the history of the dispersion, it has invariably fared ill with the people who have persecuted the Jew, well with those who have protected him. The future will still more remarkably prove this principle. So he's basically interpreting this to mean that, whoever is going to bless Jews, support Jews, provide for them, defend them, fight for them, then you're going to be blessed. This is a completely new interpretation that broke with literally centuries of almost 2 millennia of church tradition in both the Protestant and the Catholic Church. So this is the Schofield Bible. It continues to be popular, and it's printed in updated form to this day. The New Schofield Study Bible from 1984. And it's even like getting more, like the newer versions are even more Zionist. So that's, the trend of history, basically, or the trend of reform. So it's not just Schofield, by the way. It's not like Schofield just, had his commentary on the King James Version of the Bible, and then, it was selling hot off the presses. Everyone was going, oh, let's go get the newest copy of this biblical commentary. It's so amazing. It didn't happen organically like that. You had a Wall Street lawyer who was also a Zionist Jew, Samuel Untermyer. And he was one of the most wealthy and powerful attorneys in the United States. And Untermyer heavily supported Schofield. Basically, this was the patron of Schofield, and Untermyer pushed for his commentary Bible to be published and propagated by leading publishing houses. So this is documented in an academic work of history from Joseph Canfield, The Incredible Schofield and His Book. And it documents how people like Untermeyer, other Zionist Jews, opened the doors basically for Schofield. So that's really why it became published in Oxford University Press and other places. It's not because it had this kind of inherent value academically or in Christian theology or Christian tradition. It was artificially boosted.
Is that just down to evangelicalism? Is there something different happening politically in America?
Well, evangelism, 80 million people in America are evangelists. That's a quarter of the population. So that's a huge mass.
Yeah.
And you know what is scary and crazy about it is that the Bible that they follow is the Schofield interpretation of the King James Bible. The Schofield interpretation was published in the 19th century by Oxford University Press. And it has footnotes that interprets the text in a different way, and it is quite manipulated in order to kind of flip the narrative towards Israel. And there's a very famous joke. They say the Christian Bible is read from left to right. The Hebrew Bible is read from right to left. The Schofield Bible is read from bottom up, because the footnotes controlled everything. So that actually found a huge, it resonated with the evangelicals in the South Baptist Church. And this is like people like, Jerry Falwell, John Hagee. John Hagee, he is the founder of Christian United for Christ. They have a $7 million budget to to influence the candidates in the Congress. John Hagee gave $80 million from his own money, not his own money, because this is people in his congregation, to Israel. And you find all of this. So part of it is religion. Huge part of it is money, because many of the Democrats are not even evangelical, but you have now AIPAC on their Twitter account bragging about all of their candidates that we have supported have won their primaries. So, isn't that a foreign agent? Isn't that a foreign agent? What is this? Yeah, I mean, remember 2016 when everybody said, "Oh my God, Russia is interfering and tampering, cybersecurity is tampering," and then you have AIPAC just open. It's like, yeah, if you support Israel, you're gonna win the election with our money. I was like, what?
As the world is in a total uproar. And this is why bill passed, Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, just passed the House of Representatives, 320 to 91. The bill has broad bipartisan support and will begin the process of cracking down on the anti-Semitism we've seen run rampant on college campuses across America. What he's calling anti-Semitism is, of course, the students protesting the genocide in Gaza. He forgot to mention that. So it sounds as if there's some type of causeless, irrational eruption of something or other here on college campuses, and that is not the case. It is the human reaction to massive injustice. The authorities are looking for trouble. They are going to crush this protest with maximum brutality, because this is different. This has to do with the Jews. And once you start dealing with the Jews, then all bets are off. Everything is different. None of the normal rules apply, including the United States Constitution and the First Amendment thereto. So yesterday, I tweeted this statement: 320 congressmen betrayed the American people for Jewish money. Judas got 30 pieces of silver from the Jews to just betray Jesus. Mike Johnson got $500,000 from IPAC to put Americans in legal jeopardy for quoting the Bible. By the way, is it now anti-Semitic to say that Judas got 30 pieces of silver from the Jews, or is it just illegal? It shows you the rage that is just simmering beneath the surface here, because of the entire world watching the Israelis get away with murder. That is not an exaggeration. They are getting away with murder. And there's a sense of insecurity that is creeping through the entire world, which is basically, if they can treat the Palestinians that way, what's to prevent them from treating us this way? Nothing. Nothing. And the magic formula is going to be anti-Semitism. If they say you are an anti-Semite, okay, you lose whatever protection you had as a citizen of the United States of America. The laws do not apply to you anymore. The Constitution will not defend you. You will be at the mercy of these bloodthirsty people. That's not an exaggeration. Gaza is proof of how bloodthirsty these people are, who hold the moral law in contempt. And if they, what's the intermediate stage here? It's all of those cops being called into campus. Guess what? They're not students anymore. They're Palestinians. They're terrorists. All you have to do is read the talking heads. And so once you dehumanize those students like that, before they were students at Columbia University or whatever, now they're terrorists, and now these goons can come in and treat them like Palestinians. And we know what that means. And why did they do that? How did they learn that? Because they were sent to Israel. They were all trained in Israel. This is the Israelification of local police forces that has been taking place for years throughout this country. It's the story of Cop City in Atlanta, where they had all other brutal demonstrations at Emory University. This is the story of what is happening to our country. We are now Palestinians. We can be treated, the citizens of the United States are Palestinians in an occupied country. And as Pat Buchanan used to say, the United States Congress is Israeli occupied territory. That's what it is. If we needed any proof, this is it. This is the cunning of reason. They did exactly what they shouldn't have done. They gave us proof that the entire Congress is under the control of the Israel lobby, and the entire Congress, as long as you stuff their pockets with Jewish money, they will turn on the people that they were elected to represent, and they will expose them to legal jeopardy, to the point where if you quote the Bible, you can go to jail now. Specifically, if you have to check with the Jew now about whether you're allowed to read the Bible or not. Because if you quote 1 Thessalonians 2, the Jews are the people who killed Christ, and they are enemies of the entire human race, that counts as anti-Semitism. You're not allowed to say that.
For fear of the Jews, the 12 disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ locked themselves in an upper room on the day of his burial, fearing that they too would be crucified by the murderers of God. Today, many still, even Christians, for fear of the Jews, are frightened into speaking out against Jewish designs and censure those who do, like yours truly. But Jews themselves do not fear the Goyim when prosecuting their agenda, whether it be promoting multiculturalism, the genocidal state of Israel, or even discrediting the messianic claims and historicity of the Lord Jesus Christ.
It might be the most controversial story ever.
You do not need to take the story literally.
And even here, Christians are too timid, downright cowards actually, to repudiate Jewry's anti-Christian actions, remaining silent, passive, meek as mice, even when Jews blaspheme the Lord Jesus Christ himself. Take, for instance, Jewish comedian Sarah Silverman, known as the toilet mouth of pseudo-comedy, who in a recent stage performance said that she was glad that Jesus Christ was crucified and would do it again in an effing second, if given the chance. Now watch her closely. She begins her rant with her typical stage humor.
Everybody blames the Jews for killing Christ, and then the Jews try to pass it off on the Romans. You know, I'm one of the few people that believes it was the blacks.
But once she launches into her blasphemy against Jesus Christ, her eyes glare up and her tone of voice betrays a demonic malice.
I hope the Jews did kill Christ. I'd do it again. I'd fucking do it again in a second.
In her 2011 feature, The Morning After, Silverman has sex with God, portrayed as an elderly black sex fiend who pleads with Silverman unsuccessfully to remain in heaven with him as his lover.
I had a really good time last night. Come to heaven with me today. You'll see the past and the future. You can fly.
For Silverman, like many of her co-religionist Jewish comedians, whose audiences are largely white Gentiles, God is to be trashed, mongolized, degraded into the lowest form of vulgarity. Jewish comedians also love to make Gentiles laugh, to distract them from Jewish global designs to control us all. And crossing the borderline between the tasteful and the vulgar is certainly not one of Jewry's hallmarks. Sarah Silverman constantly mocks and ridicules Christianity, as in this picture, where she compares Christian symbols such as the Holy Cross of Christ to demons, bats, women's girdles, and women's bras. Then there's Jewish comedians Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, who in their crass mockery have a painting of the Lord Jesus Christ placed above a toilet. Larry David starts urinating into the toilet next to the painting, purposely allowing his urine to splash onto the painting of Jesus. And after relieving himself, inspects his splashed urine on Jesus' eye. This is supposed to be funny. The next day, he has a shiksa, which Jews call white Gentile women, meaning unclean animal, excitedly telling Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld that suddenly a miracle tear appeared on Christ's picture.
There is a painting
hanging up of Jesus, and he's got a tear coming down on his face. A real tear that was never there before.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
That's odd.
It's a miracle. He chose us.
Are you sure it wasn't water?
Ridiculing Jesus Christ is not enough for Jewish comedians. They delight in a white woman fornicating in a simulated sex scene with Jesus Christ. In the recent movie, The 10, designed to make a mockery of the teachings of the Holy Bible, produced by Jewish film director David Wayne and distributed by movie financier David Bergstein, a virginal white librarian named Gloria is deflowered by a young Mexican stud, purposely made up to look like Jesus Christ. And of course, Gloria is convinced the young Mexican stud is Jesus Christ himself.
Jesucristo y la segunda venida.
In this next clip, we see a group of American Jews holding a pseudo-Christmas party, singing the song, Jesus is a Bastard, intertwined with one of their blasphemous verses. Joseph had the hots for Mary, and now she's got a man between her thighs.
Jesus is a bastard. Whoa, 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 whoa. Jesus is a bastard. Yeah, 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 yeah. Perhaps you should just be finding a new wife, Joseph. No, I love Mary, so she's the apple of my eye. But now another man has been between her thighs.
I'm going to let the following clips, produced by Israeli Jews, speak for themselves. One of them portraying Jesus Christ as a monkey during his crucifixion. And here we have Israeli Jews frothing at the mouth in their unabashed, bold hatred and malice towards the Lord Jesus Christ.
You and your fucking Jesus could kiss my ass, okay? We killed Jesus, we're proud of it.
Indeed, all that Christians hold sacred and holy, Israeli Jews, whom American taxpayers support, spit on, trash, and defile.
עכשיו מדי ערב אנחנו מכחישים כל מיני דברים שהכנסת... מספרים לכם שמריה אימו, אבל זה לא נכון. ההוכחה לכך היא פשוטה. כשיוחנן המטביל היה תוקע לה במריה לא הייתה קופצת מין חדשים בתוכנית הלילה של יוספוס פלביוס. אל תאמינו לה.
These are the so-called chosen people whom deluded and timid Christians cow and cater to in abject submission. But by rejecting the Lord Jesus Christ, the Jews have relinquished their chosenness and have become instead, as St. Paul asserts, enemies of the gospel and contrary to all men. For fear of the Jews, many Christians are frightened into silence and in many cases acquiesce to the many complaints by Jewry when criticized of anti-Semitism. But as for me, whose life is dedicated to defending the honor of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I will not capitulate. Never, ever try to flatter the Jew by thanking him and the Jewish people for giving you, a Gentile, the Bible. Jews don't give a damn about the Bible. They've never read it, nor even want to. And those Jews who have heard some chance passage misconstrue it with some weird spin. Or they adulterate it with their blasphemous Talmud, which calls Jesus a magician boiling in his own urine in hell. Don't look for it in any English translation. You see, I grew up as a Jew and studied with Chabad Hasidic rabbis for 2 full years. The passage is in Eastern Aramaic of the Babylonian Talmud, which only Jews have access to. The religious Jew will not discuss religion with you. He's not going to listen to a goy, and he's totally hard and against the gospel as it is. For any reasonable and most clear interpretation of sacred scriptures, he will twist into 1,000 Talmudic convulsions. Jesus is for the goyim like him, certainly not for me. The point is, most Jews don't really believe in God. It's like every Jew saying, God gave us the land of Israel. Yet, when pressed, they don't even believe God exists. Even some religious Jews only see God as an abstract concept rather than an actual person. But if a Jew feigns he does believe in God, he still pushes everything God hates. homosexuality, lesbianism, trannyism, and every possible perversion under the sun.